Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today's session is for managing project scope amid ever-evolving client needs with Linda Johnson. Let me just really quick forward-looking statement here. Please make any purchasing decisions that you have based on existing product and not on any forward-looking statements that are potentially made today. And I will go ahead and pass it over to Linda. We will leave a few minutes at the end of this session for questions as well.
Okay, so by now you all know that my name is Linda Johnson. I've been working in the Salesforce ecosystem since 2002, so for a pretty long time. I am 7 times certified. My Twitter handle is SF Godmother. And I really do thrive on helping my clients achieve success through their implementation of Salesforce. Okay, so enough about me. All right, so our agenda for today. First, I'm going to do a brief introduction of CRM Science. Second, we'll walk through and I'll talk about best practices for managing project scope. And then last, what I really want to do is dive into one of our client success stories that walks through the COVID-19 timeline, quarantine challenges that they faced, COVID-19 screenings, pre-screening surveys, where we started with Workcom and moved to Health Cloud, vaccine management, and then finally preparing for the future. So I want to start by introducing CRM Science and sharing some highlights of who we are. You may know us from Dreamforce and our well-known puzzle parties. We are a Salesforce Crest consulting partner, a product development outsourcer or a PDO, and a Salesforce.org impact partner. We are a full service Salesforce consulting firm. So our team helps organizations with implementations, custom development, and we also build App Exchange applications for ISV partners. We are fully based in the US and specialize in the industries of financial services, high tech, nonprofits, and healthcare and life sciences. And as an employer, we are very proud that we are a 4-time best practices or best places to work. Okay, we really have 3 pillars of managing scope. Businesses were affected by the pandemic and metrics judging project success changed. Thinking goes from using a large team approach to maybe a smaller team approach. Whatever approach is used, keeping these 3 pillars in mind is crucial. So number 1, agility. Your team needs to be able to work quickly using an iterative approach to the project. You start with an MVP or minimum viable product and continue to roll out additional features and functionality on a continuing iterative basis. And I think most consultancies do that already, but you really are working at a much faster pace. As the past year has shown, these changes can come as quickly as several times a week. Each customer in this environment is facing different challenges. Everyone from senior management down to the project team needs to be aligned that this is a rapidly changing environment and change management really is the name of the game. The ability to switch gears and adapt to change is critical. Number 2, resourcing. Make sure that you have the right resources assigned. Characteristics of these resources should include high availability. So the ability and willingness to work potentially overtime, odd hours, and freedom from other projects assignments. a willingness or ability to quickly change gears, a flexible mindset and attitude, excellent communication skills, and it goes without saying, the necessary technical skills. Your entire team has to be aligned on the business pain and requirements so that everyone understands the importance of the project. And finally, flexibility. Even in normal times, a client will throw surprises your way. I think most people have experienced that. And in a pandemic such as we experienced over the past year, that will definitely occur. As clients' business needs change, and they can change very rapidly, you need to be flexible and able to plan for unforeseen work. Changes can come as often as weekly. We experience changes several times a week, and you need to be flexible enough and agile enough to manage these changes. Not only is your work environment changing rapidly, but your personal life is also affected. Plan ahead and have contingency plans in place. Um, so have meals in the freezer, masks everywhere, house, car, and in my case, in my purse. Be prepared for chaos. So I'm going to dive into a use case based on our experience with one of our most valued clients. While preparing for this slide presentation and looking back, information was changing rapidly, and I forgot how fast everything occurred. January 9th, WHO announced mysterious coronavirus related pneumonia in Wuhan, China. On January 31st, the WHO issues a global health emergency. February 25th, the CDC says COVID-19 is heading toward pandemic status. March 11th, the WHO declares COVID-19 a pandemic. And March 13th, Trump declares COVID-19 a US national emergency. Change happens rapidly, and you don't realize it until you look back. Make sure that you keep a log of what happens on your project so that you can go back and reflect when you're doing a retrospective of all the changes, all the things that occurred. In the run up to the WHO declaring COVID-19 a pandemic, our client was watching with great concern and starting to plan on how they needed to operate while keeping their residents and staff safe. As the quarantine began, they were faced with a number of specific challenges, not only in ensuring the safety of their staff and residents and vendors, but in complying with different and ever-changing reporting needs of both the state and federal governments. Remember, this pandemic over the past year, nobody had ever faced anything like this in their lifetime. And so things were rapidly changing, rapidly evolving. Our client immediately jumped into action with a plan of prevention and distancing. Initially, they started with a paper form, and then they asked CRM Science to step in to help make this process easier. The paper form they were using took an extremely long time to fill out. This caused traffic backups at some facility gates, resulting in jammed streets and worker frustration, or caused people to gather in lobbies while waiting to fill out the forms. This introduced the additional danger of prolonged exposure. The pillars of managing scope were quickly put to use as we started building what we call the screener application. It was an all hands on deck, both on the client side and a dedicated CRM team, client team, with a focus of getting this app designed, built, tested, and deployed as quickly as possible. Our screener application digitized the process, allowed for the collection of data quickly and digitally through an iPad, which sped up the screening process. It cleared the traffic and minimized gatherings in the facility lobbies. We were able to build something flexible enough so that we could quickly change the persona, whether it was an employee, a visitor, or a resident, the questions asked, and the response logic behind allowing or disallowing entry as regulations changed and or our client was asked to provide different data. Although we normally work in 2-week sprints, remembering the early days and months, flexibility and agility were the name of the game as we were making changes, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes on multiple times during the week. While working on the Screener app, we were also watching, researching, and learning as Salesforce began developing new products to help companies with pandemic-related issues. When Work.com became available on Health Cloud, we quickly recognized that we could leverage the employee management functionality to help facilitate the screening application process. So, based on the Salesforce recommended best practice, we stood up a new instance of Health Cloud and installed the Work.com managed package. Using surveys and the Work.com functionality, we built out a pre-screening process that could inform employees whether they were eligible to come on campus, had to stay home, or needed to be rapid tested prior to entering the work campus. We built a connection from the Health Cloud org to the client Sales Cloud org, and using the results obtained from the pre-screening surveys, the Screener app was able to alert the gate guards of these results immediately before they proceeded with the screening. And this saved a lot of time when the employees did their pre-screening surveys. They didn't have to go through the full round of questions because they've already answered them. With the future always in mind and the limitations presented based on our use case with Work.com, we began to architect the move from Work.com functionality to native Health Cloud functionality to manage the pre-screening process. So all these things that I'm talking about did not happen in a vacuum. All along, we're still making changes to the Screener app. We're rolling out changes to the pre-screening process. So everything is working at a very fast pace and in tandem and overlapping each process. We also had to make sure that all the pieces came together and worked together seamlessly and well. Still using surveys, but now using standard objects along with automation processes. Earlier this year, we moved all pre-screening functionality off Work.com into just native Health Cloud functionality. As the pandemic continued, vaccines finally became available. Our client and CRM Science immediately saw the need to leverage Health Cloud for vaccine management. There was a lot of talk about building applications for vaccine management. So we were tasked by our client with providing a number of features to solve the overall vaccine management problem. Several requirements from the start included a flexible solution and also a solution that was built with no code or very minimal code. A proof of concept was quickly developed. The features included gaining consent for participation in the vaccine program, qualifying the candidate for eligibility, tracking the vaccine being administered, the ability to schedule a second dose if it was required, and finally, the ability to follow up and track and report adverse reactions. Not only was this proof of concept developed in a month, we achieved the ask of a no-code solution through the use of surveys, email reminders, custom settings, and screen flows. All along while working on this process, we were keeping an eye on Salesforce changes to Health Cloud. we were able to recognize that a prudent move was to go from using several of the Health Cloud custom objects to the new standard objects. So changes were rapidly made to facilitate this move. So not only was our client making and requesting changes rapidly, we also had to keep an eye on what is changing in their technical environment to make sure that we were giving them the best tools and the best system for their needs. The vaccine management program is really ready to roll out. And with the recent authorization to administer vaccines, our clients will be moving to use this vaccine management program shortly. As we have all seen in the past year, changes necessitated by forces outside our control can happen very quickly. This continues to be the case, and we continue to monitor and manage changes and use cases for this program. Preparing for the future. As we were building out the vaccine management program, we needed to keep the future in sight. Our client already had several use cases where this would fit in with their needs. As we built this out, we had to build something flexible enough to handle management of other vaccine programs. Programs such as administering a potential yearly COVID-19 vaccine, flu, pneumonia, shingles vaccines, plus any future, heaven forbid, vaccines that might be in development. I believe that we have accomplished this. And as things are starting to open up, our client is looking forward to holding on-site, in-person events and conducting on-site tours. To prepare for these activities, we're building out functionality that will send pre-screening surveys to potential prospects attending these activities. Whereas before we had data moving from Health Cloud to Sales Cloud, we will now have data about these prospects moving from Sales Cloud to Health Cloud, building on the functionality already created and expanding this functionality. Pre-screening surveys will be sent to these prospects. As it happens with the employee survey results, when the prospect survey responses come in and have been received by Health Cloud, the results are captured and transmitted back to Sales Cloud. So similar to the functionality of the employee pre-screen surveys, when this prospect shows up on site for the event, the guard at the gate is already informed as to the result of the pre-screen survey, and the screening process is minimized, thus giving a better experience for the prospect. Okay, I think
we've had a number of questions come in through the chat, and so I will fire them off at you, Linda, if that sounds good.
that's good.
Awesome. So the first one that came through from Crystal, so wondering what you find clients will accept as minimal viable product, MVP. We are finding that our clients want everything by the launch date, which causes our launches to take 4 to 6 months, and our clients are often surprised to hear that an implementation takes that long. How do you manage those unforeseen changes and still stay in scope?
I think, one of the things, especially with this client, right up front, it was you can't have everything. If you want this, we had to move at such a fast pace. I think, if memory serves me, like the screener app, the first iteration of that took maybe a week, 2 weeks. It really was an all hands on deck. So it was basically, what do we need, absolutely have to have to roll this out? There are always, and I've been doing this for a long time, there are always things that once you really start digging into what the customer wants, you can come back with, all right, yeah, we really want that, but it's a nice to have. But what we absolutely have to run our business right now is XYZ. So I'm going to say that sometimes it's on the consultant side that you really need to push back a little bit about that. And if changes come up, because they're going to, and they say, oh, yes, but we need it to do this, then you say, okay, how is this going to affect our timeline? Um, there's typically a cost incurred, additional cost. So you have to really go back and be very honest and straightforward with your client and say, all right, this is going to impact the entire project. What is it? And the other thing I want to say, I think up front, you need to really stress and make sure that you have an understanding of just what is it that they need and want. So, the whole discovery process that we went through was very rapid. A lot of it was we initially took that paper form and converted it to digitally, built it on Salesforce. I hope that answered your question.
Mhm. There's a few more in here. So are all these changes new SOWs or change orders as you went through the various changes on the project?
Well, I'm probably not the one to say. Most of it was, I don't want to say that it was open, an open pocketbook, but for this client, because they're very regulated, it really was. And I don't want to. It it was and it wasn't. Okay. Now that we're moving into, in the beginning days, it was whatever it takes. We got to do this. We got to get it done, and get it working. Now, we always look at, okay, we're not going to just, I don't want to say this word, but we're not going to milk it either. It's like, no, I have to show what it is I'm doing and what you're paying for. So, um, in the beginning, no, not so much change orders, SOWs. We've gotten back to more of a regular cadence of, yes, there are some changes. Okay, so we need a change order for that. We need a new SOW. There are things that we're working on now, and there's going to be things rolling out that we've gotten back to a more normal cadence. Things just were moving so fast that it was pretty much, okay, and change orders would go in after the fact, only because we had to get the work done and get it out there.
Another question that came through: how do you work to be sure clients fully understand a scope? We have clients that aren't always tech savvy, and it has come up later in the project that they didn't fully understand what was in their SOW. And how do you pivot with that coming to light, even when you provide plenty of resources at the creation of it and as it is implemented?
I have found, and I'm talking from my personal experience, and working with clients, that as you're gathering requirements and you're discussing scope, there are a lot of times you're dealing with folks that aren't tech savvy. So you need to, number one, really understand their business. I think that's critical for a consultant when you're dealing with a client, to be able to go in there and really understand what their business is and how they do, how they work in their business. But you need to kind of step down so that you're talking their language and not use so much technical speak when you're working on things. The other thing is, um, you need you also need to make sure you understand. Early on in my career, I found out, and I learned very quickly that their the client's going to say something and think they're explaining everything. What I'm hearing is not what they're saying or think they're saying. So I'm hearing something different. So I have learned to, especially in something that's very critical, is to repeat it back and say, so let me see if I understand what it is you need to have done, or how you need this to work, or what your process is, and repeat it back. Because I found a lot of times they'd say, oh, no, 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 that's not really how it works. It works like this. But when you can do that and get that interaction back and forth, I think you get a better understanding of what it is they're trying to do, and ask questions. I can't tell you how many times I really need to understand what the client is trying to do and how they want to do it and why they want to do it, so that I can come back and make sure that the product I'm giving them meets their needs.
What about changes that aren't so obvious, like staff turnover mid-project with new staff having different priorities, or changes in funding on the client's part, or realizing what they thought was MVP isn't a true MVP because we've surfaced internal process challenges? Those types of shifting client changes that aren't clear cut with scoping and change management. How would you recommend addressing those types of changes?
Wow. Yeah. So it's always hard when you have a dedicated team and then someone leaves mid-project. I think everybody on the team really needs an understanding. Maybe they don't know all the technical details, but I think they need to understand what's being done and why it's being done. So everybody needs to be on the same page. The technical pieces, you can quickly get someone up to speed, but you can't just have one person with all the information, all the knowledge. Um, I think part of it too is, as a consultancy, you need to have even your senior management team involved, and recognize that, hey, there are impacts. This does impact the client, and it does impact the team. So um, you need to understand that. As far as I know that internal processes, changes internally within a company can affect things, but I think you need to be honest with your client, and try and mitigate how those changes are impacting them as much as possible.